picture this. You're sitting there, maybe scrolling through your phone, or you're reading an article on a quiet Sunday morning.
Right, just totally relaxed.
Yeah. And the argument the author is making, it's just clean.
Hmm.
Like the language is super confident. Every single point they make seems to just lock perfectly into place.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's very satisfying.
It really is. And as you're reading, you find yourself just, nodding along or thinking to yourself, yes, this makes complete sense.
You're not second-guessing it at all.
Exactly. There is zero hesitation in your mind. You don't have this sudden impulse to open a new tab and fact check their claims. There's just this quiet, familiar feeling washing over you, the feeling of absolute certainty.
Right.
But then
But then imagine you step out into the real world. You're in a conversation with a colleague or a friend, and they disagree with you. They would present a completely different view.
and it's not even that they're obviously wrong. Right. No, they're just coming from a different angle. But instead of feeling curious about their perspective, something else bubbles up inside you. It's this subtle, kind of prickly tension.
Yeah, that tension is so revealing because you aren't feeling defensive because you mathematically know they're incorrect. You're feeling defensive because they are actively disrupting your sense of certainty.
And that contrast right there is the entire focus of our deep dive today. We're pulling from this really fascinating set of notes we received. It's a document titled S1EP6.docsays, all about the psychology of certainty.
Such a great breakdown.
It really is. So the mission of this deep dive is to explore a truly profound idea from these sources. The concept that certainty is not just some cold, calculating cognitive state. It is, at its core, an emotional relief.
It's a feeling.
Exactly. We're going to unpack why our brains so desperately crave the feeling of being right, how that craving actually tricks us on a daily basis, and how understanding the mechanics behind this can, fundamentally change the way you make decisions.
It changes everything once you see it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because where do we even begin to dismantle this illusion we all walk around with?
Well, I think we have to start by looking at what the source material calls the common assumption.
The common assumption.
Yeah, this is a deeply intuitive yet fundamentally flawed belief that sits underneath almost all of our everyday experiences. The assumption is simply this: if something feels certain, it must be true.
Like we just inherently trust the feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We walk around assuming that our internal feeling of certainty is a direct, highly accurate gauge of external reality.
Which, it makes sense on a surface level because that assumption aligns with what we experience every day. Like when we finally understand a difficult concept, it feels clear.
Yeah, the fog lifts.
Right. And when we're lost or confused, it feels murky and uncertain. So we associate the feeling with the reality.
And because of that consistent daily experience, the mind starts to build a really dangerous shortcut. It wires together two concepts that shouldn't necessarily be glued together. It decides that clarity equals correctness, and therefore certainty equals truth. And what is so insidious about this is how heavily our society reinforces this shortcut.
Oh, absolutely. Everywhere you look.
Right. Like in school, you're taught from day one that answers are strictly right or wrong. There's a very clear binary, and you are rewarded for arriving at the certain answer as quickly as possible.
And it doesn't stop in school. Think about workplace discussions or political debates.
Exactly. The speakers who project the most confidence are almost always deemed the most persuasive.
Yeah.
Regardless of the actual quality of their data, we read their lack of hesitation as a guarantee of their accuracy.
Yeah, if they don't doubt themselves, why should we doubt them?
Right. And of course, online, the strongest, most unwavering opinions are the ones that gain the most attention and algorithmic traction.
Because algorithms are designed to feed us what keeps us engaged. And nothing is more engaging and, frankly, comforting than content that just reinforces our existing clarity.
Yeah, so over time, certainty stops being just an internal feeling. It morphs into this highly trusted signal of objective reality.
Thinking about the shortcut reminds me of taking off a pair of really tight shoes at the end of a long day.
Oh, that is the best feeling.
It's incredible, right? You've been walking around, your feet are killing you, and the second you slide those shoes off, the relief just washes over you. But here's the catch. That feeling of relief doesn't mean you've actually solved the underlying problem of why your feet hurt.
Right. Your feet are still a mess.
Exactly. You haven't fixed your posture, you haven't bought better shoes, you haven't healed the blister forming on your heel. It just means the immediate painful tension is gone. The pressure's lifted.
That's a great way to put it.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. If certainty is just a biological illusion of relief, If it's just taking off tight shoes without fixing the actual problem,
Hmm.
how did we survive as a species?
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah. Shouldn't evolution have weeded out a mechanism that makes us objectively blind to the truth?
Well, that is a completely fair challenge, but it assumes that evolution prioritizes objective truth over functional survival.
Oh, and it doesn't.
It doesn't. What's fascinating here is that we trust this feeling blindly because, evolutionarily speaking, certainty isn't powerful because it's completely accurate. It's powerful because it serves critical psychological functions. It's doing a job for us. Several jobs, actually.
Let's dig into those hidden jobs, because understanding why the brain needs this feeling so badly kind of reorients how we view our own decision-making.
Totally. So the first and perhaps most vital function is that certainty reduces internal tension. When you're in a state of uncertainty, your brain perceives it as an open loop.
Like a program running in the background.
Exactly. You are constantly generating questions. What is the actual truth here? What should my next move be?
Yeah.
What if I'm completely wrong about this situation?
And that is exhausting.
It's incredibly uncomfortable. It's like a low-grade alarm bell, just constantly ringing in the background of your mind, demanding your attention. Certainty acts as the off switch. It closes that loop instantly, silencing the alarm.
And closing that loop is vital because leaving it open burns a massive amount of energy, right?
Yes. That is the second major function-conserving mental energy. We often forget that careful, analytical thinking is biologically expensive.
It literally burns calories.
It does. It requires time, sustained focus, and actual metabolic effort. To weigh multiple conflicting pieces of evidence demands a lot of your brain's resources. So certainty steps in and tells the mind, okay, this is enough.
Like, you can stop calculating now.
Right. There is no need to continue processing. It acts as an energy-saving mode.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The sources point out that this isn't just about saving calories or resolving questions. It gets much deeper into who we actually are. It stabilizes our identity.
Oh, this is huge.
Hmm.
Our beliefs do not exist in a vacuum. They aren't just isolated data points stored in some sterile mental filing cabinet.
Right, they're tied to us.
They are deeply interwoven with how we see ourselves, what we deeply value, and what social groups we belong to.
Like, if you believe strongly in a particular political ideology or even, a specific dietary lifestyle.
Yes, that belief connects you to a community. So when your certainty about that belief is threatened, it rarely feels like just an intellectual debate. It feels like your actual self and your place within your community is being destabilized.
So if we summarize these hidden functions, we crave certainty because it reduces anxiety, it saves us exhausting mental labor, it protects our fragile sense of identity.
And it gives us a sense of control in a world that is, frankly, chaotic and unpredictable.
Oh, and it helps our social standing, too, because projecting confidence makes people see you as a leader, whereas hesitation is usually misread as weakness.
Absolutely. When you view all of those factors together, a pretty profound realization emerges. Certainty is not a luxury, and it's not an optional feature of the human mind.
It's a requirement.
It is a functional requirement. It is structurally useful for our survival and our sanity. Without it, our mental systems would quite literally crash under the crushing weight of constant, unresolved ambiguity.
So the brain is basically running this continuous cost-benefit analysis. It decides that a good enough answer that allows you to move forward and act is vastly superior to a perfect answer that leaves you paralyzed by analysis for days on end.
It has to cut corners.
Right, it cuts the corner so the organism can keep functioning. But, and this is the big but, while that energy-saving corner cutting might be great for our daily survival, like deciding what route to take to work or what to eat for lunch, when does the system actually fail us?
Because it definitely does fail us.
Yeah. What happens when we're in a situation that demands actual extreme accuracy over just mere functional survival?
Well, the problem isn't that certainty exists. The problem is that this mechanism continues to operate blindly, even when the conditions around us change drastically. There are several specific environments where this reliance on certainty totally breaks down.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is when we are faced with conflicting information.
So let's say you're researching a topic, maybe looking into a new medical treatment or, a controversial news story, and you encounter two different sources. Both are well-written, both are coherent, both seem completely plausible.
But they say opposite things.
Exact.
In a perfect world, the mind would hold that tension. It would acknowledge the contradiction and say, okay, I have two conflicting pieces of data. I need to investigate further and keep my judgment suspended.
But in reality,
In reality, the mind hates that tension. Remember the open loop. It's ringing that alarm bell. So it resolves the discomfort as quickly as possible by simply favoring whichever source preserves the certainty you already had before you started researching.
it just looks for the path of least cognitive resistance.
Exactly.
It's a mechanism that basically forces us into confirmation bias just to stop the discomfort of not knowing. I actually remember a time this happened to me in a very literal sense. Yeah, I was driving to a friend's wedding out in this rural area. I lost cell service, so my GPS froze. And I was absolutely convinced I needed to take a left at this particular fork in the road.
Oh no, I can see where this is going.
Right. And my partner, who was looking at a physical map we luckily had in the glove box, told me the venue was actually to the right, the map was clear, the conflicting information was sitting right there in the passenger seat.
But you went left.
I felt this overwhelming surge of certainty about my internal compass. I completely ignored the map and took the left. I drove for 20 minutes in the wrong direction simply because admitting I was uncertain and needing to pull over to study the map just felt too uncomfortable.
That driving scenario is a perfect microcosm of another condition where the system breaks down. And that's when our identity or ego gets attached to the decision and the stakes start to rise.
Right, because when you're driving and someone challenges your sense of direction, it stops being about the road and starts being about your competence.
Exactly. Now imagine applying that same mechanism to major financial commitments, massive career moves, or critical health choices. In these high-stakes moments, certainty acts like a pair of handcuffs. It locks your thinking in place.
Because changing your mind feels like a threat.
Yes. When new evidence presents itself, like the physical map in your car, it becomes incredibly hard to accept. Because accepting it would mean admitting a flaw in your judgment, which introduces massive instability into a very important area of your life.
And if we add an audience to that high-stakes situation, it gets even worse. Think about a high-stakes boardroom meeting or a tense debate on a public stage. When thinking becomes public, the social cost of uncertainty skyrockets.
Oh, absolutely. In a public setting, certainty carries immense social value. To say, I don't know or I might be wrong, feels like a direct loss of status and authority.
You look weak.
Right. So the uncertainty doesn't necessarily disappear from your mind, but you bury it under a performance of absolute confidence. You defend the flawed plan simply because you are the one who proposed it. And then, if we introduce the element of compressed time into that public high-stakes environment, the breakdown is complete.
Because when we're rushed, everything accelerates.
Under pressure, the mind has less time for checking facts and zero time for deep reflection. It relies entirely on immediate coherence. The story that makes sense is on the owl. The fastest wins.
So certainty appears much faster in these scenarios.
Faster, but it has absolutely no depth to it. It is a fragile shell of confidence based on whatever narrative assembled itself first. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains so many bad decisions.
Let's map this onto a massive career move to make it real. Say you're deciding whether to quit your stable corporate job to join a highly risky startup. The deadline to sign the offer letter is in 24 hours, so there's your compressed time.
High pressure.
Yeah, and the stakes are sky high, as it involves your livelihood. And maybe you've already told a few colleagues you're leaning toward the startup, meaning your thinking is now public.
You've committed socially.
Right. You sit down to do one last review of the startup's financials, and you spot a glaring red flag in their revenue projections. Instead of actually evaluating that red flag objectively, your brain just goes into overdrive to dismiss it.
You rationalize it.
You tell yourself, oh, all startups have messy financials, it's fine. You double down on your first instinct. You're not actually researching anymore. You're just defending your identity as a risk taker to avoid looking foolish in public and to alleviate the immense anxiety of the ticking clock.
It's terrifying when you break it down like that. In those moments, certainty completely stops being a helpful tool for navigating daily life. It morphs into a rigid constraint.
It traps you.
It totally traps you in a narrative that might be actively leading you toward a disastrous outcome, but you feel perfectly calm and confident while you make the leap.
So, to break out of this constraint, we need to understand the fundamental mechanics operating beneath our conscious awareness. What is the mind literally doing when it manufactures this feeling of certainty out of thin air?
Well, the mind is constantly performing a massive balancing act behind the scenes. First and foremost, it is compressing complexity. Reality is infinitely detailed. It's nuanced, chaotic, and just far too vast to process fully.
We'd be overwhelmed.
Exactly. So the mind takes this overwhelming reality and reduces it into simple, manageable patterns. When you feel certain, it is just a signal from your brain that this compression process feels complete.
And as it compresses that reality, it's making a very specific choice about what to prioritize, right?
Yes, the mind actively prioritizes stability over accuracy. Think about it. A perfectly accurate model of reality would be constantly shifting, constantly updating with every new, minute piece of data you encounter.
Which sounds great in theory.
In theory. But that system, while highly accurate, is too unstable to be usable. You would never be able to make a decision because the variables would always be changing. The mind prefers consistency, predictability, and coherence, even if it means sacrificing precision.
It wants a map it can actually read, not a map that updates its topography every 5 seconds.
Right. It is protecting its internal coherence. Contradictions create mental friction. They slow down our processing speed and they spike our discomfort. Certainty sweeps in, removes the contradiction, and acts as a release valve for that anxiety.
But this creates a permanent, inescapable structural tension within the mind, the tension between accuracy and stability.
That's the core of it. Accuracy fundamentally requires openness. It requires a willingness to revise your beliefs, to seek out dissenting opinions, and to maintain a high tolerance for sitting in ambiguity.
Which we know the brain hates.
It hates it. And stability requires the exact opposite. It requires closure. It demands coherence and a severe reduction in contradiction. You cannot maximize both of these forces at the same time. Increasing your demand for accuracy almost always reduces your immediate stability and vice versa.
So what does this all mean? Let me see if I can map this onto something tangible to clarify the mechanics of that trade-off. It's like trying to pack a suitcase for a long trip to a place where the weather is completely unpredictable.
Okay, and I like this.
You can approach this in one of two ways. First, you can try to pack perfectly for every single possible weather scenario. A snowstorm, a heat wave, torrential rain.
That represents accuracy.
Exactly. But to achieve that, it takes you days to pack. You need 5 massive suitcases. You're constantly second-guessing your choices, and you are exhausted before you even leave for the airport.
You're paralyzed by the possibilities.
Right. Alternatively, you can just throw a pair of jeans, a few t-shirts, and a light jacket into a single carry-on, zip the suitcase shut, and head out the door so you don't miss your flight. That represents stability.
You just made a choice and moved on.
Yeah. Certainty is just the mind deciding to zip the suitcase shut with the basics. It might not be perfectly packed for the reality of the destination, but it ensures you actually get on the plane.
That analogy captures the structural tension perfectly. When you force the suitcase shut, you immediately reduce your uncertainty, which gives you stability. You make your flight, you move forward. But that increased stability guarantees you are less open to correction.
Like if it snows when you land, you don't have boots.
Exactly. Certainty sits entirely on the side of stability. It provides emotional relief and closure, but it does so by strictly limiting how much of reality's methy, contradictory details are allowed into the bag. And you can't permanently remove this tension. You can only become aware of it.
And because we usually aren't aware of it, because we constantly mistake the mind's desire for that zipped suitcase stability as actual objective truth, we start seeing highly predictable and sometimes deeply destructive patterns emerge in our lives and in our society.
The real-world fallout of this misunderstanding is profound. The first consequence is the creation of overconfidence cycles.
Oh, these are the worst.
They are. This occurs when an individual feels completely sure of themselves and acts decisively based on that certainty. They inevitably encounter an error or a failure because their suitcase wasn't packed accurately for the situation.
Right.
But instead of learning from the failure and opening themselves up to new information, they reinterpret the outcome to preserve their original certainty. They blame external factors, or they convince themselves they were actually right, but just unlucky.
The mind spins the failure so the feeling of certainty remains completely intact. And that leads directly into the next pattern, which is the escalation of commitment.
Doubling down.
Exactly. Think about how often you see someone double down on a bad investment, a toxic relationship, or a flawed argument. Once a belief is locked in with that feeling of certainty, abandoning it becomes incredibly painful.
So painful.
As overwhelming evidence accumulates against their belief, the person actually digs their heels in deeper. Their commitment increases in the very face of contradictory facts.
And we also see this escalate from the individual to the societal level through polarization. Groups form around a shared, unquestioned certainty. As they do, the boundaries between different groups harden.
The us versus them mentality.
Right. The differences between people seem to become sharper and more extreme. It's not necessarily because the people themselves have fundamentally changed, but because the shared certainty of the group has compressed away all the nuance and hardened the ideological battle lines.
It's wild to watch happen.
In these highly polarized spaces, reaction completely replaces reflection. Fast, unexamined responses become the default because quick certainty kills the need to actually stop, listen, and think.
And all of this culminates in a phenomenon called false clarity. Situations begin to appear much simpler than they actually are. The world is vastly complex, but certainty acts like a rigid filter that strips away all the gray areas.
Nuance just disappears from the public discourse.
Not because the nuance isn't there, but because the collective mind has compressed it away to maintain the stability of the group's narrative.
Exactly.
When you see a group of people deeply polarized over a complex issue, or you watch a colleague double down on a project after making an obvious mistake, it is immensely frustrating. But understanding this mechanism kind of reframes the behavior.
It gives you a lot of empathy, honestly.
It does. They aren't necessarily doing this deliberately just to be stubborn or malicious. They are completely trapped in an overconfidence cycle. Their brain is prioritizing stability over accuracy, and it's doing it on autopilot. But, how do we fight this false clarity when it feels so incredibly real to us in the moment?
This raises an important question, and the source notes provide a really helpful, unifying mental model to navigate this. Imagine your mind as a dynamic system governed by a constant tug-of-war between two opposing internal forces.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
One force is constantly pulling you toward closure. It desperately wants answers. It wants completion, resolution, and an end to ambiguity. It seems to reduce all that internal tension by finishing the picture and zipping the bag shut.
And the other force.
The opposing force is pulling you toward openness. This force is willing to tolerate uncertainty. It keeps questions active. It is comfortable leaving structures incomplete while it gathers more data and surveys the landscape.
So certainty is simply the conscious experience we have when the force of closure completely dominates the system.
Exactly. And uncertainty is what we feel when the force of openness is still active and holding the system open. The critical takeaway here is that your mental system cannot maximize both forces simultaneously.
It's a trade-off.
A constant trade-off. If you allow closure to dominate too quickly, you drastically reduce your accuracy and fall into false clarity. But if you allow openness to rule unchecked, continually gathering data without ever committing to a conclusion, you reduce your stability to the point of total paralysis.
You never get on the plane.
Right. A healthy mind is designed to continuously oscillate back and forth between these two states. You gather information, you tolerate the ambiguity, and then eventually you must synthesize it and make a decision to act.
It's not trying to find the perfect, ultimate, unshakable truth. It's just trying to function in a messy, shifting world.
Yeah.
The trick isn't to somehow banish certainty from your life. That's impossible and would leave you entirely paralyzed.
Definitely.
The trick is to recognize the shift, to realize that what feels like absolute, undeniable truth is often just the precise moment when your mental system reached its energy limit and decided, okay, this is stable enough to stop thinking.
It's a really powerful reframe.
It really is. To synthesize all the insights we've pulled from these sources today, the ultimate takeaway is that the warm, satisfying feeling of being right is rarely an objective measure of the actual truth. It is simply an emotional signal. It's the exact moment when your brain's internal machinery has decided that it is too expensive or too uncomfortable to keep searching for answers. It is the mind prioritizing its own stability over the messy, complex reality of the world.
Beautifully said.
So the next time you are in a heated disagreement or you're staring down a big, high-stakes decision and you feel that immediate, powerful rush of absolute certainty, just pause for a second. Take a breath. Recognize that feeling for what it actually is. It's an emotional release valve. It's a biological shortcut your brain is taking to save mental energy and protect your identity.
Just noticing it changes its power over you.
Exactly. Once you recognize that, you can intentionally choose to push back against it. You can intentionally invite just a little bit of that uncomfortable openness back into the equation. Leave the suitcase unzipped just a tiny bit longer, just long enough to ensure you aren't sacrificing accuracy for the mere illusion of control.
That's the key.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on today. If our brains are biologically wired to stop seeking the truth the very second we feel stable enough, what incredible paradigm-shifting realities are you actively locking out of your life right now simply because the uncertainty would feel too uncomfortable to entertain?